What happens when a woman running from her past meets a man still haunted by his? Naomi, a survivor craving peace, and Malik, a widowed father guarding his heart, never expected to find love next door. But when a little girl, a plate of cookies, and one terrifying knock change everything, their lives collide in the most unexpected, powerful way. This isn't just a romance. It's a story of healing, protection, and the kind of love that rebuilds you. Where are you watching from? Let us know below, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories that just might steal your breath. The afternoon sun melted over the skyline of Atlanta, casting golden streaks across the glass walls of Naomi Blake's new apartment. She stood barefoot on the smooth hardwood floor, her fingers gripping the leather handle of the final suitcase. With one last breath, she pushed it into the corner and let out a soft, quiet sigh. The hum of traffic far below buzzed like a distant lullaby, and the gentle swish of wind swept in through the balcony doors, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of magnolias and concrete heat. This was it. Not Washington, D.C., where she had studied. Not L.A., where she had lost herself. Not the sharp, suffocating edges of Isaiah Knight's penthouse. No. This place, this vibrant, unapologetic stretch of sky and steel, was hers. Naomi walked slowly to the balcony, resting her forearms on the rail. The view stretched endlessly, a kaleidoscope of lights, towers, and lives all moving in rhythm below her. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, her chest rising in an unfamiliar rhythm. Freedom wasn't a loud scream. It was a quiet inhale. It was the absence of being watched, of being explained, managed, doubted. There were no text messages checking where she was, no late night apologies wrapped in rage, no friends tiptoeing around her bruised pride. Just silence and sunlight. She opened her eyes and let the warmth kiss her skin. She had made a vow to herself: no more men, no more chaos, no more dancing on eggshells while someone else called it love. She didn't need a partner to feel whole. She didn't need a partner to feel whole. She needed space to breathe, to rebuild, to be, and maybe, just maybe, to remember who Naomi Blake had been before Isaiah had clipped her wings and renamed her his. The apartment itself was sleek, modern, and just the right amount of impersonal. Clean white walls, soft gray accents, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like art. A blank canvas for a woman reinventing her life. She had chosen it for the light, the security, and the promise that no one knew her here. It was perfect. As she made her way to the kitchen, she passed a large mirror leaning against the wall. She paused, catching her reflection mid-step. Her long curls were pulled back into a high puff, soft against her high cheekbones. Her eyes, deep, wide, and brown, held stories she still didn't have the strength to tell. Her frame, slim but strong, had survived more than it ever should had to. Naomi stared at herself, then nodded slowly. "We're home," she whispered. Not to the walls, but to the woman in the mirror. Later, while unpacking plates and mugs with slow, deliberate motions, Naomi heard a muffled voice outside her door, a child's giggle, light and echoing through the hall. Curious, she peeked through the peephole. A little girl, maybe 10, skipped past, her braids bouncing with each step. She wore a pink hoodie, one sleeve pushed up, and carried a thick chapter book nearly half her size. Naomi watched as she paused in front of the apartment across the hall. 18, then disappeared inside. For a moment, the hallway fell silent again. Shrugging off the flicker of curiosity, Naomi turned back to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. She didn't need distractions. Not even the cute ones in pink hoodies. Her job as a remote financial analyst started next week, and she planned to keep her head down, do her work, and avoid emotional entanglements of any kind. But still, as the sun dipped behind the city and the room grew dim, Naomi found herself back at the balcony door. Down below, families gathered in the shared courtyard, couples strolled with hands intertwined, and a few children giggled on the swing set beneath the oak tree. And there she was again. The same little girl, sitting alone on the swing, legs swaying lazily as she turned the pages of her book. Naomi leaned against the doorframe, glass in hand. She wasn't looking for meaning in the moment, but something about the child's quiet presence struck her. Maybe it was the calmness. Maybe it was the strength. Maybe it was the familiarity. She didn't know yet that this girl would be the thread that unraveled every wall she'd built. She only knew one thing for sure. Something was already shifting in the silence. The next morning arrived with a gentle drizzle that kissed the windows and softened the sharp edges of the Atlanta skyline. Naomi padded into her kitchen, hoodie zipped up halfway, coffee in hand. The apartment felt still, save for the low hum of a soul playlist echoing faintly from her speaker. She moved slowly, savoring the rhythm of her new routine, one she had crafted entirely for herself. No one waiting on her. No one watching her. No one telling her she was too much, too distant, too ambitious. By noon, the clouds had scattered, and the sun returned, bright and bold, like it had something to prove. Naomi stood at the sink, rinsing a bowl, when something outside the window caught her attention. There, in the backyard of the apartment complex, was the same little girl from yesterday, perched on the swing beneath the oak tree. Her legs moved back and forth, not with speed or energy, but with a quiet rhythm, like the motion helped her think. The book was back too, thick and worn, balanced carefully in her lap, as her small fingers flipped each page with the precision of someone twice her age. Naomi tilted her head. There was something magnetic about her, something beyond the adorable braids and the neon yellow hoodie. The girl didn't seem lonely, just still. And there was power in stillness, Naomi knew. It was the kind of calm that came after storms, the kind you earned by surviving. Over the next few days, Naomi found herself drawn to that window more often than she'd admit. She saw the girl at the same time every evening, like clockwork, always reading, always alone, always wearing something colorful. Sometimes it was a polka dot scarf, other times socks that looked like ice cream cones. But what remained constant was her presence. She became a fixture in Naomi's new life, like the morning sunlight or the scent of cinnamon in her favorite tea. Naomi didn't know her name yet. She didn't even know her voice. But she could feel something familiar in the girl's energy. A silent strength, a patience honed by waiting. It was the same quiet armor Naomi herself had worn in the final months with Isaiah, when words had become weapons, and silence had been her only defense. One evening, just as Naomi was folding laundry on the couch with the balcony doors open, she heard it again, the soft giggle, the shuffle of sneakers in the hallway. A knock followed, gentle, rhythmic, polite. Naomi paused, one hand still tangled in a towel. She wasn't expecting anyone. When she opened the door, she froze, not out of fear, but surprise. There she was, the swing girl, standing in the hallway with a dazzling smile, her braids tied back with red ribbons, clutching a paper plate wrapped carefully in foil. "Hi," she said, voice sweet but confident. "I'm Amara." "I'm Mara. I live across the hall with my dad. He baked cookies last night, and I thought you might want some." Naomi blinked, caught off guard by the girl's presence and poise. "That's really thoughtful of you, Amara." "Thank you." Amara's eyes sparkled. "Can I come in?" Naomi smiled, stepping aside. "Of course." The next few minutes unfolded like a scene from a movie Naomi hadn't known she needed. She poured 2 glasses of oat milk, set the cookies on the coffee table, and sat cross, legged beside Amara on the rug. The cookies were warm and perfect, just the right blend of chocolate and cinnamon. And Amara talked as if they were old friends catching up after years apart. "I go to Harmony Charter School," Amara said proudly, her small fingers picking at a cookie edge. "Fifth grade. I like math, but I love reading. Daddy travels a lot for work. He's in Nigeria sometimes, or Houston. But I'm used to it. I just read while I wait." Naomi swallowed a lump in her throat. "You're really brave," she said softly. Amara shrugged, but her eyes were wistful. "I guess. I just don't want Daddy to worry, so I try to be good. I sit on the swing and read and wait for him to come home." Naomi looked at her for a long moment. She didn't know what broke her more: the resilience in Amara's tone, or the way she said wait like it was something she was born doing. She reached out and squeezed Amara's hand gently. "I work from home," Naomi said with a small smile. "So if you ever need someone to hang with or bake cookies with, I'm right across the hall." Amara beamed.
"You're really nice. Thank you, Miss Naomi."
"Just Naomi," she replied, laughing. And in that moment, surrounded by warm cookies and the glow of a new beginning, Naomi felt something stir, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. She didn't know it yet, but this little girl wasn't just her neighbor. She was the key to everything that came next. The days that followed felt like a soft breeze through Naomi's once stiff apartment. Amara became a regular presence, her laughter curling through the rooms like sunlight. She'd show up most afternoons after school, arms full of storybooks or beads for bracelet, chatting non-stop about her friends, her favorite authors, and the silly things her teachers said. Naomi would listen, amused and intrigued, as she folded laundry or stirred a pot of rice, occasionally asking questions that made Amara's eyes sparkle with excitement. It wasn't planned. It never is. But slowly, Amara had become part of Naomi's routine, a joyful interruption she hadn't realized she needed. Naomi found herself smiling more, breathing easier. The apartment, once too quiet to feel like home, now hummed with life. One Thursday afternoon, as the sky turned a muted gray and the scent of jollof rice filled the kitchen, Naomi felt lighter than she had in weeks. She had just set the dining table, humming along to her favorite neo-soul playlist, when the knock came. She smiled automatically, expecting the now familiar light tapping that meant Amara was here, maybe with another bracelet or story to share. But this knock wasn't light. It was firm. Sharp, male. Naomi's heart skipped. Her hands, still wet from washing rice, tensed. She wiped them quickly on a kitchen towel and moved toward the door, her bare feet silent on the cool floor. As she opened it, everything inside her stilled. The man standing there was tall, easily over 6 feet, with broad shoulders, deep brown skin, and a face that looked like it had been carved from quiet storms and hard decisions. His dark eyes were sharp, intense, and unreadable. His neatly groomed beard outlined a jawline that could cut glass, and the black shirt he wore clung to a muscular frame that didn't need to say a word to make itself known. Naomi stood frozen, her breath catching in her throat. He looked like someone who didn't waste time, someone who didn't tolerate mistakes. "I'm here for Amara," he said flatly, his voice low and smooth but hard. Cold. It took Naomi a second too long to respond. Oh, okay," she said, turning slightly. "Amara, sweetie, your dad's here." Amara appeared in seconds, a spoonful of rice still in her mouth and a napkin in hand. "Hi, Daddy," she said, skipping toward the door. But Malak Carter wasn't looking at his daughter. His eyes stayed on Naomi, cool, appraising, slightly accusing. "You don't feed my child without informing me," he said, each word clipped and precise. Naomi blinked. "Excuse me." The tension in the doorway thickened like fog. The warmth Naomi had been basking in evaporated in an instant. Her hands clenched at her sides, more in disbelief than fear. "I didn't know I needed your permission to offer cookies and jollof of rice," she replied, her voice even but edged. "I wasn't trying to overstep. She was just hungry and sweet." Malik didn't flinch. He nodded once, said, "Let's go, Amara," and turned away without another word. Naomi shut the door, her jaw still tight. She walked back to the table slowly, eyes falling on Amara's half-eaten plate. The scent of cinnamon and tomatoes now seemed intrusive, unwelcome. She gathered the plates with stiff fingers and rinsed them in the sink, but her mind kept replaying the moment. "Who does he think he is?" she thought, scrubbing a spoon harder than necessary. That man had shown up like a thunderstorm, rude, unannounced, and breathtaking, and acted like she was some stranger offering poison. No thank you, no grace, no hello, just accusation. She leaned on the counter, staring out the kitchen window at the empty swing. Her heart ached a little. Amara had brought joy into her life without even trying. But her father, he was a walking red flag. And Naomi had promised herself, no more red flags. So right there, she made a decision. No more deep involvement. If Amara came by again, Naomi would smile, be kind, and gently send her back home. No offense, no drama, just peace. She had fought hard for her peace. She wasn't about to let anyone, even a dangerously attractive father with eyes like midnight and a jawline sculpted by the gods, shake it loose. Across the hall, apartment 18B was unusually quiet that night. Malik Carter stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, arms crossed, watching as Amara curled up under her floral blanket, without the usual requests for a bedtime story or hot cocoa. She didn't hum or twirl her braids or ask for 5 more minutes. She simply turned to the wall and let silence wrap around her like a second quilt. He frowned, stepping closer. "You okay, kiddo?" Amara didn't move at first. Then, softly, she turned her head just enough for him to see her eyes. Shiny but brave, you were mean to miss Naomi. Malik blinked, thrown by the honesty. "She's my friend," Amara continued, her voice steady but sad. "She helps me with my homework. She gives me snacks, she listens when I talk, and she never makes me feel like I'm a problem." Malik sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of her words dropping like stones in his chest. He reached out and gently tucked a stray braid behind her ear. "I know," he said quietly. "You're right. She's not trying to be my mom," Amara whispered, eyes drifting shut. "She's just nice." You didn't have to talk to her like that. There was no defense he could offer. He'd felt justified in the moment, protective, responsible. But now, sitting beside his daughter's tiny, disappointed form, all he felt was guilt. His jaw tightened as he exhaled. "I guess I was a little harsh," he admitted. "I'll apologize tomorrow." "Promise." Amara yawned, curling deeper into her pillow. "Do it nicely," she mumbled. "So she doesn't hate me." Malik let out a breath that was half chuckle, half sigh. "I'll be on my best behavior." But when he left her room and closed the door behind him, sleep didn't come. He sat on the edge of his bed, still dressed, staring into the shadows of his apartment, as if they held answers. His thoughts drifted back to the way Naomi had looked at him, stunned, offended, hurt. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't defended herself. She didn't need to. There had been strength in her silence, in the way she calmly ended the conversation without giving him anything else to feed off of. It unsettled him, not because she had challenged his authority, but because she hadn't. There was something about her, not just her beauty, which he had clocked the moment she opened the door. Those deep brown eyes, that rich, even toned skin, the way she moved like she'd learned to walk through fire and not flinch. No, it wasn't just that. It was her stillness, her grace, the way she had treated Amara, not with the overcompensation of someone trying to impress, but with the warmth of someone who genuinely cared. He hadn't seen that kind of kindness in years. He hadn't let himself want that kind of softness in even longer. Malik leaned back against the headboard and rubbed his hands over his face. It had been 4 years since Ameka died. 4 long years of raising a daughter alone, of sealing off the broken pieces, of burying his heart beneath board meetings, contracts, and international flights. He hadn't allowed himself to feel anything more than the ache of survival. But Naomi Blake had slipped through that armor like sunlight through a crack. And now, lying in the dark, he felt something in his chest that both irritated and intrigued him. Curiosity, guilt, maybe more. He turned on his side, eyes fixed on the soft glow of the city lights spilling in through the blinds. He didn't know what exactly Naomi had stirred in him, but he knew one thing with a rare kind of certainty. He owed her an apology. A real one. The kind that didn't come from obligation, but from the growing need to look her in the eyes and say, and maybe, just maybe, he'd get the chance to see that quiet strength again, this time without the ice between them. The morning after was crisp and golden, the kind of day that hinted at possibilities. Naomi sat on her woven rug in the living room, knees drawn to her chest, a steaming mug of chai in her hands. Normally, she'd be journaling by now, scribbling affirmations or gratitude notes into her soft, leather-bound notebook. But today, her thoughts were too tangled for ink. Her mind kept looping back to the night before, to that man's eyes at her doorway, dark and sharp like thunderclouds, and the low, clipped tone of his voice as he'd spoken to her like she was some intruder. She still felt the sting of it, how quickly warmth had turned to frost. She had told herself she was past caring what men thought, especially men like him. Commanding, cold, sure of their authority. But something about Malik Carter lingered in her head longer than she was willing to admit. Maybe it was how he hadn't raised his voice, but still made the air feel heavy. Maybe it was how quickly his presence had filled her doorway, and then her thoughts. She didn't want this. She didn't want him taking up space in her mind. Her life was supposed to be about calm now, control, healing. And yet, as she lifted the mug to her lips, she knew she wasn't just upset about how he'd spoken to her. She was upset because it mattered. She didn't want it to matter. A knock startled her. Not the quick, polite rhythm of Amara's visit. This knock was firmer. Intentional. Naomi's heart paused mid-beat. She placed the mug down carefully and rose to her feet, pulse racing for reasons she wasn't ready to name. She opened the door slowly, already bracing for whatever came next. There he was. Malik Carter stood before her, dressed casually in a fitted black t-shirt and gray joggers. His beard was freshly lined, his hair neat. He looked less like the CEO she had imagined, and more like a man trying not to let his nerves show. His posture was straight, but his eyes, they weren't sharp this time. They were uncertain, softer. "Good morning," he said, voice lower, less clipped. "Can we talk?" Naomi crossed her arms gently over her chest, leaning one shoulder against the doorframe. "Talk." He nodded once. Steady.
I went out of line yesterday. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. I was being protective, yes, but that doesn't excuse my tone. It was rude.
The words didn't stumble or stammer. They landed firm but sincere, like they had been rehearsed a dozen times before he showed up at her door. Naomi studied him for a moment. His hands were at his sides, not clenched. His voice wasn't rushed. His eyes, though slightly tired, held no defense, only honesty. "Thank you," she said finally. Apology accepted. Malik let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, the tension in his shoulders releasing slightly. But before he could step away, Naomi tilted her head, her voice gentle but firm. "Just so we're clear, you were very rude." A small smirk touched the corner of his lips. "Yeah, I've been told I can be intense." "A bit," she replied, her own lips twitching in response. The tension between them shifted, the weight turning into something more charged, quieter but undeniable. "She likes you, you know," Malik said, nodding toward the apartment beyond her. "Amara. She hasn't been this excited about anything in a while. She's a beautiful soul," Naomi said, and the truth of it warmed her voice. "You're doing a good job with her." Those words, so simple, so unexpected, landed hard. Malik didn't respond right away. He just looked at her, eyes lingering like he wasn't used to hearing something so kind, so real. "I appreciate that," he said eventually, his voice quieter now. He stepped back. "Thanks for listening. I'll let you get back to your morning." Naomi nodded, and as he turned, their eyes met again. Just for a second, a silent moment passed between them, not awkward but full. Something unspoken, something neither of them was ready to name. As the door clicked softly shut behind her, Naomi leaned her back against it, breath slow and deep. She wasn't sure, but it wasn't nothing. And as for Malik, he walked back to his apartment, feeling a strange flutter in his chest. Not nerves, not guilt. Something else. Something warmer. Something that had been asleep for a long, long time. The week that followed unfolded like a quiet truce. Naomi kept her distance, not out of resentment but out of caution. She still saw Amara from time to time, skipping down the hallway or waving from the garden swing, her smile as bright as ever. Occasionally, the little girl would knock softly on Naomi's door, notebook in hand, asking for help with math or a new word she'd found in a book. Naomi welcomed her, of course, but kept the visits brief, sweet but measured, kind but careful. She had drawn her boundary not just for Malik's sake, but for her own. Still, something about that man haunted her thoughts in the quiet moments. It wasn't just the apology. It was the way he'd stood there, that morning, sun slicing across his jaw like a spotlight, and meant every word. It was how his voice had softened, how he hadn't tried to impress her. Just a man owning his mistakes. Just a father doing his best. Naomi hated that she noticed those things. She hated it even more that she remembered them. By Saturday, she needed air. She hadn't left the apartment complex since moving in, and the walls were starting to whisper. So she slipped into a long, olive-green sundress, tied her curls back into a loose bun, grabbed her woven-to bag, and headed out. The neighborhood bustled with weekend energy. Horns honking, music spilling out of car windows, food trucks parked at corners with smells too tempting to ignore. It was chaotic and colorful, and just the right amount of distraction. The grocery store was only a few blocks away. Inside, the air was cool and bright, shelves lined like soldiers, baskets humming along the tile floor. Naomi drifted from aisle to aisle, comparing rice brands and scanning her list. She was in the cereal aisle, debating between brown rice and jasmine, when a voice behind her cut through the silence. If it were up to Amara, she'd pick the one with the cartoon lion. Naomi turned, startled. Malik stood there, jeans fitted just right, plain black tee, clean white sneakers. He looked relaxed, even a little amused, hands tucked in his pockets like he hadn't just dropped a line that made her stomach do a somersault. "You shop here?" she asked, recovering. "Sometimes," he said with a small smile. "When I'm not in Angola or Houston, or stuck in traffic somewhere between both." Naomi glanced back at the rice bags, heart tapping a little faster than she wanted to admit. "Well, for the record, the cartoon lion one has way too much sugar." He laughed softly. "Noted. I'll break the news to her gently." There was a pause, but not the awkward kind. Just long enough to notice how tall he really was, how his cologne lingered faintly in the air, how he was watching her, not with intensity, not like before, but like he saw something in her he didn't expect. "So," he said slowly, rubbing the back of his neck, something she noticed he did when uncertain. "How have you been?" Naomi looked up at him, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. "I've been good. Work's picking up. The place finally feels like home." "I'm glad to hear that." Another pause. He shifted his weight slightly like he wasn't sure whether to say the next part. Then he met her eyes again. "Listen, I know we got off to a weird start. My fault. But I'd really like to get to know you properly. If that's okay." Naomi blinked. There it was again. That unexpected sincerity catching her off guard. She looked at him, at the way he stood there without pressure, without performance. Just present. She exhaled slowly. "Malik," she said, offering a small smile. "I appreciate that. Really. But I'm not looking for anything. Not right now." His face didn't fall, but something in his eyes dimmed just a little. Still, he nodded, accepting it without question. "I get that," he said, voice low. "I really do." She dropped a bag of jasmine rice into her basket and gave him one last nod. "Take care, Malik." "You too, Naomi." As she walked away, her footsteps quiet on the tile, Malik watched her go. He couldn't explain it. Why he couldn't stop thinking about her. Why he couldn't stop thinking about her. Why this woman he barely knew made something in him ache and stretch at the same time. But for the first time in years, he didn't just want to protect. He wanted to understand. And that realization was terrifying and impossible to ignore. Saturday morning came with a kind of silence that wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. Naomi stood in the middle of her apartment, folding freshly laundered towels, while soft Afro soul played in the background, the scent of warm fabric softener mingling with the faint aroma of tomatoes and spices from the stew she'd started earlier. The sunlight streamed through the windows like gold, gentle and constant, but her heart felt strangely heavy. She hadn't seen Amara in days. Not a knock. Not a giggle in the hallway. Not even a glimpse of her flipping through pages on the backyard swing. Naomi had intentionally pulled back, reminding herself of the line she needed to keep. After all, she wasn't Amara's mother. She wasn't family. She was just the woman across the hall who got too comfortable, too fast. Malik's face from that first night still flashed in her mind, his voice cutting, his stance stiff with warning. That was enough to keep her cautious, even if her chest ached a little more with each passing day. She folded a lavender towel in half, then paused mid-motion as a soft knock echoed from the door. It wasn't firm like Malik's. It wasn't light like before either. It was somewhere in between, hesitant, familiar. Naomi's heart jumped. Her feet moved before her mind caught up. She opened the door slowly, breath held without realizing it. Amara stood there in her Saturday jeans and a pink hoodie with sparkly stars on the sleeves. Her braids were frizzy at the ends, tied back in loose puffs. But it wasn't the outfit that broke Naomi. It was the look in her eyes. Sad. Tired, like someone carrying a weight too big for her tiny frame. Without saying a word, Amara stepped inside and dropped onto the couch. Naomi closed the door quietly, moved to kneel in front of her, concern etched across her face. "Hey, what's wrong?" Amara didn't speak right away. She looked down at the notebook she clutched in her hands, then up at Naomi with a trembling lip. "You've been ignoring me." Naomi's heart cracked. "I know it's because of my dad," Amara continued, voice shaking. "But he's not a bad person. He's just sad. A lot." Naomi blinked. "Sad?" "Yeah. Sometimes I hear him crying in his room at night. But when I ask him, he says he's fine. He always says he's fine." The words hit Naomi like a blow to the chest. She reached out instinctively, pulling Amara into a warm, tight hug. The girl sank into her arms without resistance. "I didn't mean to make you feel left out," Naomi whispered, stroking her back. "I was just trying to be careful. I was just trying to be careful. I thought maybe I was overstepping. I didn't want to cause problems." Amara's voice was barely audible against Naomi's shoulder. "You didn't. You made things better." Naomi pulled back, gently cupping the girl's cheek. "I promise, okay? I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here for you." "Promise," Amara whispered. "Promise." Later that afternoon, Naomi returned to the kitchen with renewed energy. She added plantains to the pan, the sizzle filling the room like applause. Amara stood beside her at the stove, stirring the pepper chicken like a little sous chef, dancing between bites of spicy rice and humming along to the music. They laughed, told jokes, spilled a little sauce, and for the first time in a week, the apartment felt like a home again. When the food was ready, Naomi carefully packed it into 2 containers and added a bowl of fruit salad for good measure. Amara grinned, practically bouncing in her sneakers as they walked together down the hall. This time, it was Naomi who knocked. Malik opened the door, his face a mix of surprise and uncertainty. He wore dark sweats and a white t-shirt, his beard freshly trimmed. The air between them felt thick, fragile. "I brought lunch," Naomi said with a small, hopeful smile. "Thought maybe we could start over." Malik looked at her, then down at the containers in her hands, then at Amara's eager face. He stepped aside slowly. "Yeah, come in, please." And just like that, something shifted again, quiet but unmistakable. As they laid the table and Amara set out napkins with the seriousness of a royal banquet planner, Naomi caught Malik glancing at her. Naomi caught Malik glancing at her. Naomi caught Malik glancing at her. Not guarded this time. She didn't look away. This wasn't the moment everything changed, but it was the moment they all started to hope again. The aroma of jollof rice, smoky and rich, hung in the air like a warm embrace. Naomi stirred the pot gently, the wooden spoon rhythmically scraping the sides, as Amara swayed beside her, humming off key, to the song playing on the Bluetooth speaker. The late afternoon light filtered through the kitchen windows, casting gold across the countertop and glinting off the beads in Amara's hair. It felt strangely like a memory in real time, one Naomi hadn't known she'd needed. The afternoon had unfolded in the kind of way that only happened when you stopped trying to control everything. After they had unpacked the lunch containers and set the table, things just flowed. Malik had been quiet at first, reserved like he wasn't sure whether this was real or a trap. But as Naomi cracked jokes with Amara and playfully scolded her for sneaking too many fried plantains, his shoulders loosened. The tension in his brow softened. And when he took the first spoonful of jollof rice, His expression shifted from guarded to stunned. He paused mid-chew and looked up at her, like he'd just tasted a miracle. "Okay," he said, swallowing. "This is the best jollive I've ever had. No competition." Naomi laughed, brushing flour off her palm. "You're just saying that. I swear, if you sold this, I'd buy it in bulk." Amara giggled, already reaching for another piece of pepper chicken. "I told you, Daddy, she's magic." Naomi smiled, warmth blooming behind her ribs. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. The laughter echoing off the walls was enough. After lunch, Amara disappeared into her room with a set of coloring pencils and a determined mission to create an entire fairy kingdom on paper. That left Naomi and Malik sitting alone at the dining table. Plates cleared, fingers loosely wrapped around half-drunk glasses of hibiscus juice. The hum of the apartment building, the distant honks of the city, even the occasional breeze slipping through the open balcony door. Everything felt suspended in a quiet kind of calm. They talked. About work. About Atlanta traffic. About favorite childhood snacks and weird high school memories. It was easy. Surprisingly so. Naomi found herself leaning in when he spoke, her laughter slipping out freely when he cracked a joke about burning his eyebrows off once trying to fry plantains as a teen. And Malik. He watched her. Not in the way men sometimes stared, like they were reading a menu, but with a kind of reverence. Like he couldn't quite figure her out and didn't want to rush the process. He noticed things, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, how her left thumb rubbed the curve of her cup when she was thinking, the way she listened, really listened, with her whole presence, like every word mattered. By the time the light outside had turned dusky pink and Amara came back out, proudly holding up a drawing of a fairy queen with Naomi's curls and her own hoodie, Malik's guard had almost completely melted. They walked Naomi to the door together, Amara looping her arm through Naomi's like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Malik stood behind them, his hand brushing the doorframe, as if he wanted to say something more. Something he hadn't quite found the words for yet. "Thank you," he said finally. "For all of it." Naomi tilted her head. "You already thanked me. Twice." "This one's different," he replied, eyes steady on hers. "This one's for being here."
Ringing.
Naomi's throat tightened just slightly. She offered him a gentle smile. And then she left, walking back into her apartment with the faintest echo of his words following her like perfume. That night, as she curled up on her couch with a blanket and her thoughts, she realized something terrifyingly simple. She felt safe. Not just physically, but emotionally. Her walls were still there, sure, but they weren't as high. Not around them. Not anymore. And somewhere deep in her chest, buried beneath years of silence and survival, something small stirred. Not quite love. Not yet. But something like home. The night air was thick with the scent of rain that hadn't fallen yet. The kind of humidity that clung to your skin and made the world feel expectant. Naomi had just stepped out of the shower, her skin warm beneath her rose gold silk nightgown, when she heard it. Knock. Firm. Measured. Too slow to be Amara. Too deliberate to be a neighbor borrowing sugar. Her stomach flipped. Something wasn't right. She padded barefoot to the door, heart beginning to thrum with a dread she hadn't felt in months. When she opened it, every ounce of breath in her body stalled. There he was, Isaiah Knight. Her ex. The man who had hollowed her out with sweet words and sharp silences, who had turned love into a leash and freedom into a threat. He stood just outside her door like he belonged there, wearing that same smirk that used to unravel her sense of reality. "Naomi," he said, his voice smooth like oil, eyes raking over her with an uninvited familiarity. "You haven't returned my calls. I had to come see you." Her hand gripped the edge of the door. "You need to leave." He didn't. He stepped forward, not enough to cross the threshold, but just enough to remind her how easily he used to. "Come on, baby, we need to talk. You can't just disappear like that. After everything we've been through." "I didn't disappear," she whispered, breath shaky. "I escaped." Isaiah's jaw ticked, and his smile faltered for a beat before returning, colder. "Don't be dramatic. You always had a flair for that." She tried to close the door, but his hand pressed against it, not shoving, not violent, just firm. Calculated. A reminder. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest, her mouth dry. The air shifted. Every trauma she'd packed neatly in the boxes of her past came flooding back all at once. His voice rising, his moods flipping, the way he'd hold her arm too tight and call it affection. She slammed the door shut, locked it, then double, locked it with trembling fingers. Her chest heaved as panic clawed up her throat. She backed away from the door, the silk clinging to her damp skin. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She was shaking, crying before she realized the tears had even started. And then, without a second thought, she grabbed her phone. No shoes, no robe. Just fear wrapped in satin, and ran across the hall. She banged on Malik's door with both fists, the sound echoing down the hallway like thunder. He opened it almost immediately, eyebrows furrowed in confusion, until he saw her. "Naomi?" She couldn't speak. She just collapsed into his arms, her entire body trembling. His arms closed around her like armor. "What happened? Are you hurt?" he asked, voice already thick with urgency. Naomi looked up at him, eyes wide with panic. "It's him. Isaiah. He found me. He was at my door." Malik's face darkened. "Did he touch you?" "No," she whispered, voice cracking. "But I was scared. I still am." He wrapped her tighter against his chest, fury building behind his calm. "He's not coming near you again. Not while I'm here." He guided her to the couch, got her a glass of water, and sat beside her, rubbing her back in slow, soothing circles. Naomi drank in small sips, her breathing gradually slowing, her body still pressed to his, like she was afraid she'd unravel without the contact. "You can stay here tonight," he said gently. "My bed's yours." She blinked. "Are you sure?" "I want you to feel safe," he said. "You deserve that." And that night, for the first time since the weight of Isaiah had been lifted, Naomi fell asleep not with her fists clenched or her breath shallow, but in the safety of a space she didn't have to question. Malik didn't join her in the bed. He sat at the edge for a long while, watching her breathe, making sure the fear had truly passed. Something shifted in him, too, because somewhere between her shivering arrival and the slow rise and fall of her chest in sleep, Malik realized he didn't just want to protect her. He wanted to love her. Fully. And for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of what that might mean. Morning sunlight filtered into Malik's bedroom like a blessing, warm and golden, casting soft patterns across the white sheets. Naomi stirred slowly, the scent of pancakes and something sweet, frying in oil curling through the air like a gentle wake-up call. She blinked against the light, disoriented for a moment, until she remembered the night before. Isaiah. The panic. The knock. Malik's arms. His words. She sat up, his oversized white shirt clinging loosely to her shoulders, the memory of his steady presence still wrapped around her like comfort. Her heart no longer raced. It moved with purpose, now steady and calm. For the first time in what felt like years, she had slept without fear. Padding barefoot across the wooden floor, she followed the smell of breakfast into the kitchen. There he was, Malik, wearing black joggers and a white tee, barefoot and focused as he flipped pancakes with the kind of concentration usually reserved for delicate negotiations. His back was broad, relaxed, peaceful. A man no longer wrapped in armor, but simply present. "Good morning, handsome," Naomi said, leaning against the counter with a sleepy smile. He turned, a grin spreading across his face like sunrise. "Look who's glowing." She laughed, brushing a curl behind her ear. "That's your fault." Before he could respond, Amara came bounding into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her face lighting up at the sight of Naomi. "You slept over again," she exclaimed, wrapping her arms around Naomi's waist. Naomi knelt down, hugging her back. "Yes, princess, and I just might never leave." "Good," Amara giggled. They ate breakfast together at the small round table. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, sweet plantains, all made with a kind of love that couldn't be faked. Between bites and bursts of laughter, Naomi felt something settle in her chest, something whole and warm. The three of them fit together effortlessly, like puzzle pieces that hadn't even known they were missing their match. After they cleared the table, and Amara wandered off to her room to color, Naomi and Malik moved to the couch. The morning stillness shifted, giving way to something deeper. Naomi curled her legs beneath her and turned to him, her voice quiet. "I never told anyone. Everything." Malik's expression softened. "You don't have to." "No," she said, shaking her head gently. "I want to." And then, slowly, she told him. About Isaiah. About the charming beginnings that turned into silent punishments. The gaslighting, the manipulation. The bruises that faded on her skin, but stayed in her bones. How every time she tried to leave, he'd cry, beg, promise, threaten to hurt himself. How she started to believe she was the problem. How she almost stopped believing she deserved to be free. Malik didn't interrupt. He didn't look away. He just held her hand, squeezing it tight when the silence between words stretched too long. "I thought it was love," Naomi said, eyes glassy, "but it was control. And when I finally left, I didn't just run from him. I ran from who I had become. I ran from who I had become. I came here hoping to find peace. Not love. Not that." "You are free," Malik said, voice low and steady. "And you're safe now." She nodded slowly, exhaling the kind of breath that comes when something heavy is finally released. After a moment, he looked down at their hands and then back up at her. "My wife, Amaka. She was everything. Bold. Brilliant. Stubborn as hell." Naomi's gaze softened. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer 6 months after Amara turned 6. It happened fast. She fought like hell, but it wasn't enough. I watched her fade away every day. I hated how helpless I felt. After she passed, I buried myself in work. Shut the world out. I didn't trust myself to protect anyone again. Naomi reached for him, their fingers lacing naturally. "You did your best." He looked at her, something raw in his eyes. "I couldn't save Amaka. But I swear to you, Naomi, I'll protect you with everything I've got. No one will ever hurt you again." Tears pooled in her eyes, not from pain, but from the overwhelming sense that she had finally been seen. Truly seen. And still chosen. In the golden quiet of that Sunday morning, with old wounds finally spoken and new trust blooming in the spaces between them, something unshakable was born. Not out of perfection, but out of understanding. Two hearts, bruised, beating, belonging. The morning arrived with purpose. While most of Atlanta still rubbed sleep from its eyes, Malik Carter was already deep in motion, his phone pressed to his ear as he paced the length of his office, the sharp click of his steps echoing against the hardwood. This wasn't about business today, not oil shipments or infrastructure meetings. This was personal. By noon, it was done. A restraining order, ironclad, urgent, and absolute, was signed, filed, and delivered. Backed by one of the most powerful legal teams in the state, it didn't just keep Isaiah a night away from Naomi. It made sure if he so much as breathed wrong near her, the consequences would be swift and merciless. He was ordered to leave Georgia within 24 hours. No loopholes, no appeals, no appeals. No more shadows lingering outside her door. And Malik wasn't finished. Isaiah received a final warning, delivered by someone who didn't wear a badge but carried just as much authority. If Naomi Blake ever felt afraid again, if she ever reported so much as a text or a phone call, Isaiah wouldn't just be arrested, he'd be blacklisted, shut out from every major market, from funding, from boardrooms. He would disappear the way he had tried to make Naomi disappear. And so, Isaiah did the only thing cowards do when stripped of their power. He ran. Back to the coiled comfort of London, tail tucked, ego bruised, and doors slamming shut behind him. Later that evening, Malik stood in Naomi's doorway once again, but this time there was no tension in his shoulders, no unspoken warning in his eyes. Just calm, steady. Certain, he's gone, he said simply. Naomi stared at him, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and relief.
What do you mean?
He's gone, Malik repeated. Out of state, out of your life, for good. For a moment, Naomi couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then the tears came, not the panicked kind she'd known all too well, but a slow, trembling release. Relief crashed over her like a wave. Her knees gave slightly, and she stepped forward, wrapping her arms around Malik's waist, burying her face in his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Malik." He held her tightly, his hand cradling the back of her head. "You never have to thank me for protecting you," he murmured. That night, they shared dinner like a family again. Naomi helped Amara with her schoolwork while Malik folded laundry nearby, occasionally chiming in with teasing comments about handwriting or spelling. Amara beamed beneath their combined attention, her small world finally feeling safe and full again. At one point, as Amara worked silently at the table, her head gradually slumped to the side and came to rest in Naomi's lap. Naomi smiled down at her, brushing a curl from her forehead with a tenderness that surprised even her. "She's out," she said softly, looking up at Malik. He watched them for a moment, something unspoken flickering in his expression. Then he stood and opened the door to his apartment. Naomi carefully lifted Amara into her arms, carrying her across the hall like a mother would her own, Malik close behind. They tucked her in together, Malik smoothing the covers over her, Naomi placing her drawing pad gently beside her pillow. When they returned to the living room, the silence between them was different, gentler, heavier, with things not yet said. Naomi turned to him, her voice quiet but sure. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Malik replied, "just being here, just trusting me." She offered a small smile, eyes soft. "I should get going. It's late." She turned to leave, but he reached for her hand, lightly, gently, just enough to make her stop. "Naomi," he said. She paused, turning back. He stepped closer, the air between them humming with something fragile and fierce. "I've tried to keep this in," he said, voice low, raw. "Tried to respect your space. You're healing. But I can't pretend anymore. I want you. I want to protect you. Be there for you. Wake up next to you. Build something real. Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs. Malik. But before she could finish, he reached up and cupped her face, his eyes searching hers. I want you to be mine. Then he kissed her. Not rushed, not reckless. It was deep, deliberate, like he'd waited his whole life for the chance and wasn't willing to waste a second more. Naomi stiffened for a moment, caught off guard, then melted into him, her hands sliding up his chest, fingers curling around the back of his neck. And in that kiss, every wall between them crumbled. By the time they pulled apart, breathless, Naomi's voice trembled. I wasn't ready for that. He pulled back slightly, concern flickering in his eyes. I wanted it too, she whispered, eyes wide. And she walked away, her heart spinning, her hands trembling, not from fear this time, but from the terrifying, beautiful truth. Something real had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. Naomi couldn't sleep. She tossed, turned, pulled the covers over her head, then kicked them off entirely. Nothing worked. Her body hummed like a live wire, her mind replaying the kiss over and over again. Malik's lips, soft but certain. The heat of his hands against her cheeks, the way his words, I want you to be mine, had shattered the last of the walls she thought were unbreakable. Her fingers kept brushing her mouth as if trying to convince herself it had really happened. But it had, and now she couldn't stop feeling it. Still, fear lingered, not fear of Malik. Fear of herself, of what she was letting in. What if this was just another beautiful beginning that turned into a quiet kind of control? What if comfort became chaos again? So when Malik knocked on her door the next evening, her heart stuttered. She stood frozen for a second, staring at the door like it might answer for her. She knew why he was there, knew he wasn't the type to leave things hanging. And deep down, she didn't want him to. She opened the door. He stood there, hands in his pockets, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. There was no tension in his stance. No assumption, just a quiet question written across his face. Can we talk? He asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Naomi stepped aside. Inside, the air between them buzzed with emotion. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Not defensive, just steadying herself. Malik turned to face her, his fingers brushing over the back of the couch like he needed something to hold on to. I didn't want to feel like this again, he said. When Ameka died, I shut everything off. I told myself love was dangerous, that letting someone in meant giving them the power to destroy you. But then you walked into my life, Naomi, and everything I believed started to shift. She looked away, blinking fast. I think about you every day, he continued. Every minute. You're the first woman since her that's made me believe in something real again. And I'm scared too. But I don't want to keep pretending I don't feel this. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth, but not so close that she felt overwhelmed. I want to try again, and I wanted to be with you. Naomi's throat tightened. Her heart was screaming yes, but her mind. It still whispered, what if? So she said nothing. Not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much. Malik waited, his jaw tightening as the silence stretched. Her silence wasn't rejection. It wasn't cruel. But it was enough. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said, stepping back, pain flickering across his face. I understand. He turned and walked out the door without another word. The second it clicked shut, Naomi broke. She paced the room, hands trembling, heart pounding like she'd just lost something irreplaceable. What have I just done? she whispered to herself. Why did I let him walk away? She wasn't supposed to fall in love in Atlanta. That hadn't been part of the plan. She came here for peace, not passion, safety, not something that made her feel like she was floating and falling at the same time. But it was too late, because love had found her. And she was the one pushing it away. No, she breathed. No, I can't lose him. Without thinking, she grabbed her silk robe, tying it quickly around her waist. She flung open the door and bolted into the hallway, her bare feet slapping against the tile as she ran to his apartment. She didn't knock. She pushed the door open. There he was, Malik, sitting on the edge of his bed, head in his hands. She rushed to him, wrapped her arms around his body from behind, pressing her cheek into his back. I love you too, Malik, she whispered, her voice trembling. With all my heart. And I'm ready. I want this. No walls. No fear. Just us. He turned slowly, shocked, his eyes searching hers like he needed to be sure he heard her right. And when he saw the truth in her gaze, he kissed her. Hard, hard. Desperate. Like a man who had been starving and had just found the only thing that could fill him. They didn't speak as their mouths crashed together again and again, but every kiss said what words could not. Every touch was a vow. Every touch was a vow, every breath a promise. Their clothes came off slowly, not rushed, but intentional. Like every layer they shed was another layer of fear left behind. And when Malik made love to Naomi that night, it wasn't just passion. It was purpose. With every movement, he gave her pieces of himself that he thought had died with Amaka. And in the soft, quiet moments between kisses, she whispered, I believe you. And she meant it, with everything she had. Life lesson from Naomi and Malik's story. Naomi and Malik's journey is more than just a love story. It's a reminder of what it means to heal, to trust again, and to choose love even when it terrifies us. Both of them were broken in their own ways. Naomi by the emotional trauma of a toxic past, and Malik by the emotional trauma of a toxic past, and Malik by the grief of a love lost too soon. But healing didn't come from running away or pretending the pain didn't exist. It came from facing it, naming it, and allowing someone else to see the scars. The most powerful takeaway from their story is this. You are not your past. You are not what hurt you. You are what you choose next. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. It doesn't mean chaos or control. Real love shows up gently, fiercely, and consistently. It protects, it listens. It grows with you. Their story also teaches us that sometimes the family we dream of is just on the other side of fear. And peace doesn't always come from solitude. It often comes from finding the right people to be still with. So, what did you take away from Naomi and Malik's story? Did you relate to a character? Did a moment hit close to home? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if stories like this speak to you about healing, real love, and second chances, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change your heart. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments and welcome to the family.